On June 8, 2024, Brian was driving his 2023 Toyota Corolla GR on the highway. He then noticed that something was wrong. Smoke started pouring into the interior. Brian pulled over to take a look and see what was going on. And before he knew it, the front end of the car was completely in flames. Some of the damage was covered by insurance, but the remaining cost was to be covered in a warranty claim by Toyota. After all, the car was only 1 year old and just caught fire for no apparent reason. But to his horror, Toyota denies his claim. Why? According to their reply, his car had sent data packets to headquarters indicating that he'd driven in excess of 85 miles per hour at some point during his ownership. Among other excuses, they concluded that they couldn't provide any assistance due to his irresponsible driving. This was despite the fire having nothing to do with how fast he'd driven the car at a completely separate time. For context, the GR Corolla is a rally car which can do 0 to 60 miles an hour in under 5 seconds. This scenario sounds like a comic relief B-plot in a dystopian sci-fi movie, but this is very real and is happening today. In 2023, there was a review of the privacy standards of 25 major car brands by the Mozilla Foundation. The results were a complete disaster. 25 out of 25 brands failed to meet consumer privacy standards. According to the ABC Australia, the report revealed that murky and vague privacy policies allowed brands like BMW, Ford, Toyota, Tesla, Kia, and Subaru to collect highly sensitive and personal data. Shockingly, this includes information on activity, immigration status, race, facial expressions, weight, health, genetic information, and driving locations. And unfortunately, these companies can potentially sell this data to third parties. And the data is being collected by sensors, microphones, cameras, car apps, the phones and devices that drivers connect to their cars, and company websites. The report named Nissan as the worst offender, as they collected data on, quote, activity, health diagnosis data, and genetic data. But strangely, no one knows exactly how they got this information. Nissan say that they can share and sell consumers, quote, preferences, characteristics, psychological trends, predispositions, behavior, attitudes, intelligence abilities, and aptitudes, end quote. Nissan, or Nissan if you're American, can give this information to data brokers, law enforcement, and other third parties. The report also called out Toyota's privacy policies as, quote, a near incomprehensible galaxy, end quote, spread across 12 separate documents. Mozilla asked the companies about encryption of the data, and only one of the brands, Mercedes, even responded. Jen Kaltwriter of Mozilla was stunned by the findings and would conclude, quote, all new cars today are privacy nightmares on wheels that collect huge amounts of personal information, end quote. It's pretty insane already, but it goes deeper. In March of 2024, the New York Times released a bombshell investigation of how car companies are selling driver data to insurance companies. Data such as where they're driving, how fast they're going, how hard they accelerate and step on the brakes, pretty much everything. The companies involved include General Motors or GM, Honda, Mitsubishi, Kia, Ford, Hyundai, and Subaru, all to varying degrees as you'll soon see. Car manufacturers will always try to hammer this point home. And at a stretch, if you squint your eyes, perhaps you could see it that way. But if we're being real, it turns out that these car companies are making millions off selling your driver data to brokers and onto insurance companies. Your insurance premium could start skyrocketing and you have no idea why. The last thing you'd expect is that your humble car was snitching on you to a large corporation. The New York Times gave an example of Ken Dahl, a 65-year-old careful driver who had never been responsible for an accident. Suddenly, in 2022, he got a rude shock when his car insurance cost jumped by 21%. After shopping around, he realized something strange. Other car insurance packages were suddenly unusually high for him too. Wondering what was going on, he asked an insurance agent and he told him the real answer. He'd gotten a bad report from LexisNexis. Now who the heck is that? Well, they're one of those third-party data brokers. And where did LexisNexis get the data from? From General Motors, who made Mr. Dahl's Chevy Bolt. He dug a bit deeper and got his hands on the actual report from Lexus. It was over 130 pages long, detailing every move that he and his wife had made. 640 trips. It included when he was speeding, braked sharply or accelerated sharply, the time they set off for a trip, and the time the trip concluded. Mr. Dahl would tell the New York Times, quote, "It felt like a betrayal. They're taking information that I didn't realize was going to be shared and screwing with our insurance. The raw data from your car is collected, sold to data brokers who analyze it and then send it to your insurance company, all without you having a clue. Some car companies do sell the information directly, and some do have opt-in clauses, but many don't and are on by default without the drivers knowing. Furthermore, these drivers aren't aware that their data is being shared with third parties. Even for those drivers who opt in on data collection to improve their driving, they innocently think it's going to help them become a better driver. There's still no obvious indication that this data is going to third parties. A lot of the time, it's hidden behind the fine print of legal jargon. For sports car enthusiasts, it's a nightmare. The same New York Times report shines a light on one Corvette owner. He took his car out for a spin on a professional racetrack. His car's data was then filled with rapid acceleration events, potentially ruining his car insurance score. Another Cadillac owner had had enough after he was denied car insurance by 7 companies. And of course, his Lexus Nexus report was to blame. He finally did get car insurance, but for twice the price. Kia, Subaru and Mitsubishi also share data with LexisNexis, who has now collected data from over 10 million cars. Ford, Honda and Hyundai are also selling driver data, but to another data broker called VRisk. Subaru states that it only shares odometer data, according to the New York Times, and Ford denies the claims, saying it was only partnering with LexisNexis to, quote, explore ways to support consumers. They go on to state that they send driver data directly to insurance companies only with explicit consent. Kia, Mitsubishi, Hyundai, Honda and Acura all have driving feedback apps where drivers can opt in to monitor how well they're performing on the road. But what drivers may not know is that this data is getting passed on to, you guessed it, either LexisNexis or VRisk. So once again, insurance can potentially be affected as a result of their driving habits without them necessarily knowing. Toyota is no angel in all of this. Rafi Alam from the Australian consumer advocacy group Choice states, quote, when we looked at Toyota's privacy policy, we found that these connected service features will collect data such as fuel levels, odometer readings, vehicle location and driving data, as well as personal information like phone numbers and email addresses, end quote. And all of this isn't to mention the risks of data breaches. Unfortunately, it's just a sign of the times. Data collecting technology is becoming ever more common in newer cars, and much of this can't be opted out of. Most new cars today will have some kind of location tracking technology included. But does it have to be this way? Critics argue that these data collection practices are non-transparent. Hidden clauses in massive complicated contracts aren't good enough. California's privacy regulator, Senator Edward Markey, have called for investigations into these data practices. He questions whether this violates consumer protection laws. Overall, the intersection of connected car technology and insurance rates poses important questions about transparency and consumer rights. Our cars can't just be spying on us without our knowledge. And writing it all in the fine print, hidden within walls of legal jargon, isn't good enough either. It should be clear that there's a need for more robust consumer protections to ensure that drivers are fully aware of what data is being collected, how that data is being used, and how it can impact insurance costs. To be fair, driver data can be used for good things, such as faster emergency response times and predictive maintenance. But the potential for abuse is massive. We need to stop and think, do these benefits outweigh the risks? When it comes down to it, we've been driving cars that have been offline for over a century with very little issue. As a society, we're only just beginning to grapple with how important our personal data is. The fact pause. I think it's about time we started giving control back to consumers.